All right, we should be live. And I am here with Michael R. Miller, author of Songs of Chaos and the Dragon's Blade trilogy. And
Hello.
I
Hello,
have
hello,
to
hello.
start with my biggest question. What
Okay.
was it like meeting Christopher Paolini?
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. It was really great. It was cool. I was so nervous because so Christopher Paolini was coming to London for one night only on his Murtagh tour. Um, the event at Waterstones in London was, of course, sold out. I should have checked. I don't know why I didn't check months ago. It was obviously sold out. But I thought, screw it. And my wife actually encouraged me, just message them anyway, just to see. You never know.
Um,
So we composed a little message together. I sent it to him, and he actually responded, which was very unexpected. And he said, basically, sure, I can meet you for 10 minutes, either before or after if we find some time. I thought after might be easier. I'm not sure, maybe before might have worked better. But so I turned up like an hour thinking the event would be over, but I knew there would be a signing. So I was sort of hanging back at the signing, just waiting to the bitter end, really kind of, and the whole time just nervous about will he just be whisked away or will it won't work? And you never when you meet someone that you've had that much respect for so long, it can be quite daunting because you have that meet your heroes issue, right? It could go terribly wrong
right.
and you might regret doing it. But thankfully, no, it was great. Yeah, he's obviously very busy. He had to go out pretty fast, but I got a good 10 minutes with him at the end, just me and him, and he spoke to me just like another author. There was no talking down or patronizing or anything like that. So it felt really,
Right.
really gratifying. He really just spoke to me like as almost like an equal, which was really, really nice. Yeah, he was trying to convince me to go trad, go into traditional publishing for most of that, which was kind of fun. So yeah, we had a little back and forth about that because I think he and his family originally self-published Aragon. People kind of forget that, like way back in the early
Yep.
2000s, they self-published that, printed copies, and basically went around a lot of schools selling stuff until I believe a child at one of these schools read the book and then sent it to either their parent or some family member that worked in Penguin or something like that. That's kind of the urban myth around that. And then they took the gamble to pick it up, and obviously that paid off very well. But yeah, it was great. So obviously I was so nervous. It was kind of like the adrenaline was coursing so much that like you can almost not remember the exact details. You just remember
Right.
the feelings. And afterwards, I was so kind of buzzing that I got on the wrong tube home and ended up in this deviation for about 20 minutes off course before I realized. So yeah, it was great. And yeah, getting that photo, he was a really good sport. Holding my book up as I held Murtagh up. That was just a really, really awesome moment. And it was amazing to see how people reacted to that photo. That was really special. So yeah, it was fantastic. Hopefully in the future I can get more time with him. Fingers crossed. Um, you never know, but he's going to be writing more books in that world. So I presume there'll be more tours. I presume there'll be more opportunities, and hopefully, if songs keep selling well and doing well, I'll be ever more on that radar. And maybe there's a chance for a little for something more in the future. But thankfully, it worked out. It was one of those meet your heroes moments where it definitely felt it was good. Yeah.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
sounds like he was a pretty big influence on your writing. I would have guessed that based on the book, but you never know.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, yes and no. Yes and no. I have a few vivid memories. Again, just the not the specifics, but just the impression of being whatever age I was, 14 or something, and reading the series in bed at night, um, and knowing that he was very young when he wrote the first one. Being very young then, it kind of made me think, oh, that's something, maybe. So that whole idea was quite inspirational, and obviously it was a big series that I really enjoyed. But after Inheritance came out, I never really revisited the series um, much. So in the way, like it is a big influence on me, but I think I've been more influenced by Tolkien or Martin or Sanderson, like, because I go back to A Song of Ice and Fire about once every 2 years and listen to the whole thing. That's probably more in terms of like the writing or the kind of prose level or other things, but obviously a big inspiration in the kind of sense of writing a really cool high fantasy that succeeded in a big way, that hit the right mark, that kind of has the right vibe and tone that I like to write. So while I absolutely adore things like A Song of Ice and Fire and other books like that, as a writer, it's not quite my voice. And my voice is a little more like, I guess, that kind of agelessness sense of what Aragon was or Harry Potter was, and some of the Sanderson stuff was. I think that's where I'm most comfortable as a writer, what's happened so far. So, in terms of the tone and the vibe and the style, I suppose, even if I haven't repeatedly gone back through the series over and over and over again, like I have for some others. But yeah, definitely a big inspiration because he was so young doing it.
So one of the things I really like about Songs of Chaos is the accessibility of it. Like, I feel like I can recommend it to any of my friends. I can recommend it to my nieces, my nephews. I was even at it's a children's bookstore owned by a self-published author who likes supporting self-published books.
Yeah.
And we were talking, and she mentioned that Aragon is probably her best seller for YA.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well,
even to this day. Yeah. Well,
boy, you should check out Songs of Chaos.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she was thrilled about that.
Yeah. Okay.
She was saying how that's one of her struggles is they come in there, they read Aragon, and then it's what's next.
What's next? Wow.
It's like you can't go from Aragon to A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, not in one straight leap. No, it's a bit much. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully hopefully the owner was able to find copies if she liked them. That would be really cool to know that was happening. I mean, I'm hoping in the new year to have a slightly more focused campaign on some of the US bookstores.
Right.
With print on demand copies, it's difficult because the pricing and the discounts.
Right.
I've got a little more flexibility now, and I'm going to attempt to sort of push more, take the loss, push more, and see if we can get more volume and just see if we can knock it down. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. I can tweak the prices and stuff back. Right. I just want to see if it's a case of if you just push it as far as I can, that maybe we can get a bit more traction there because if they get into shops, they do seem to sell. Like, I know I am in about a dozen Barnes and Nobles, at least have ordered copies at some point recently. So, and whenever we're in the UK, they're at an in-person event and there's copies like physically on a shelf or table, the first book always goes. I think if people see it and feel it and touch it and read the back, like I think it has a really strong audience. So yeah, fingers crossed. If she does get it and you see it, and let me know. That'd be really cool.
I have to go in there and look and take a picture of it. But yeah, I have to imagine with these covers, you get those on the shelf and people looking at them, they're gonna be sold.
Well, that's my hope. Yeah, that's my hope. It's just about getting them on the shelves. But yeah, I mean, they are very closely linked to Aragon, like on Audible in particular, because audiobooks seem to be a power swing for the series. If you go to like the Aragon page on Audible, Ascendant is the #1 linked book to Aragon, and even on Murtagh, which is the recent release, it's like #2 after his own books or something. So it's very, very much like the crossover is so strong that Audible is basically recognizing that and obviously recommending my stuff to his readers, which is why it's brilliant that he's now putting out more books in that world, because it keeps refreshing that. And I've definitely seen not like a massive spike, but I've just seen like things have been healthier post launch of Define than I might have expected. And I think there's a lot of that in the air. There's a lot of Dragon Rider stuff in the air, but I think Murtagh come out in particular was, I think, really good. So if people love the Aragon or Inheritance, and they're looking for something like that, maybe but different enough, the Songs is definitely like a really good option. Really good option.
Hey, Shad, glad you could join us. Yeah, it's one of the great things that hits that same audience and that same like timelessness that you were talking about. But at the same time, it's a completely different story than what Aragon is. So
Yeah,
Aragon is
which
very
is why
much
it's
that classic evil emperor has
right.
control
Yeah,
of all the dragons, and
yeah.
one egg
This
gets stolen.
one egg gets stolen.
And,
Yeah, yeah.
and then yours is nothing
It's
like that.
yeah, but it's funny that like um, I do see reviews or comments to be like, yeah, the first book starts off really similar to Aragon, and then it becomes its own thing, and I'm still like, does it?
Right,
Does it though? I mean, again, like the vibe, maybe, but does it? Does it really? Like,
right.
not. I don't think so. But people can. That's fine. If they like. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
you
you're
can
right. Yeah,
always find.
there's no. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what they mean by that is some of the setups, the tropes, but Aragon didn't invent the tropes. The
Right.
tropes. The core hero's journey myth was old long before Aragon came along. Uh, you know,
Yes.
so yes, there's a grouchy mentor. Yeah,
Right.
yep, yeah, and stuff like that. But uh,
Outside of
yeah,
that, there's
outside of
like
that,
nothing in common.
the world building is totally different. Like
Mm,
I've not in a lot of Dragon Rider stories, you have that sense of there's not many dragons left or whatever. There's a kind
right.
of a scarcity to them. Whereas Mars is like,
Yes.
I reckon there's bloody loads of them, and it's like really active in the world, and so it's in every way it's totally different.
Yeah. So I have a question. I also asked
Yeah.
Ryan Cahill this question, so
Okay.
interested in hearing your answer. It's
Okay.
that in fantasy, animal companions tend to be beloved, but dragon
Yeah.
riders seem to be even a step beyond that. What do
Yeah.
you think it is that makes the connection between rider and dragon so special?
I don't know. I've been thinking about that. I mean, you also get like if you're playing video games, you have pet companion classes, and they're usually quite popular. And I think it's just, I think it's a cool idea that like the super pet, like people love their pets. Wouldn't it be great if your pet was also totally amazing and could speak to you properly? And
Right.
it's like kind of like the Pokemon thing, like Ash and Pikachu have a very strong bond. Um, and it's that I think it's sort of like that. It's sort of linked into like, wouldn't it be great if your pet was also this amazing fantasy creature and you had a magical bond and you took on the world together? The idea of having a companion that is so close to you, like a friend that's so close that you trust, you know, completely, that has your
Yes.
back 110%. There's no room for doubting them. Like I think that's a nice fantasy thought in some ways, like the sense that there is someone that would never let you down ever, who would always be there, and who wants nothing more from you than just to be there and be doing well and being healthy. It's like the most purest relationship ever. I think it just speaks to something in us that we'd all like that. And whether it's the animal companions, that's like a wolf. Wolf is quite common. You see that with like Fitz. You
Yep.
see that obviously in Game of Thrones. But the dragons are usually like just a thing on steroids. Like a dragons in whatever form they offer takes is often just an idea like taken to an extreme. So like Smaug is like an extreme psychopath, they're an extreme form of power. In the Song of Ice and Fire, that kind of like represent nukes. So like super
Yep.
weapons that get and so if you're a dragon rider, you've got all the animal companion tropes and feelings and wants and desires, but it's a dragon, so it's the coolest possible animal companion you can have. And it can fly. A wolf can't fly. Like you can,
Right.
and you have everything. It's kind of like pushed to the extreme.
Yep.
So I think that's kind of why. Um, I don't know. Yeah, yeah. I guess that'd be mine. So I think dragons in general are just stuff too extreme. And if you're doing a dragon rider story, it's doing all that animal companion, semi Pokemon, super pet, super friendship stuff, and then just taking it as far as you possibly can. And people, I think we all love a bit of that from time to time, and so there's always space for it, which is why it seems like there's a lot more at the minute, which is kind of interesting. But every I don't know 20 years there seems to be a little rash of these types of stories as people kind of want to go back and experience them.
Yeah, it's been great seeing I don't know if it's like a resident resurgence, specifically in the self-pub community with Dragon Riders. Ryan, Dragon Mage. It's just been awesome having all of these pop up around the same time. So
yeah, and
welcome,
totally
Andrew.
Independently, right? Oh, hello, Andrew.
Right.
Yeah, because Ascendant came out September 2020. So I want to say it was first, but I don't know for sure. Philip Quantrill was writing an epic with Dragon Riders prior to that. Not quite the same pure Dragon Rider thing, but there's lots of Dragon Riders in it. So Ascendant came out September 2020. I want to say Dragon Mage came out in January 2021, and then I want to say Ryan's first book came out early 2021 as well, but I don't quote me on that. So yeah, within like 6 months, the three of our stuff kind of came out without anyone planning it. So it's interesting that there was maybe something in the air that we were feeling a need for something, a return perhaps to those kinds of stories, because we hadn't had anything like that for a long time. That's partly why I decided to throw my hat in the ring. Like I was like, where has been the follow up to it? Why was there no follow up to Aragon? We had Aragon and then just nothing. It was like, why not? Yeah.
Yeah, that was something Ryan mentioned as well, because I asked him if he was worried because it's not a Grim Dark series, which Grim Dark dominates the current landscape. And he said the same thing as you. He's like, well, in my mind, it was actually more of it was missing. Not that everything needs to be Grim Dark. It was no one was filling this need.
Yeah. Well, Grim Dark was supposedly dominating, but I think it was only dominating in some trad spaces or some bookshops, and sort of because it was the only thing the publishers were putting out. But online, in audio and in ebook, from what I could tell, Grim Dark didn't sell anything much that I could tell, because I had been publishing for a little while, and I saw that really what was selling digitally was more of the classic epics, the high fantasies, the stuff like that, which made me think that it might be a chicken and egg. It might be that because the traditional publishers were not putting out these things, everyone was finding it elsewhere because there's always a yearning for it. Whatever the case was, I felt like, and because I was going to continue to self-publish at the time, I was like, well, I'm going to lean into this, and there's definitely going to be something there. There was some other Dragon Rider stuff like popped up that I saw that was doing okay, but nothing quite hit the mark for me. Like I read through them, I was like, yeah, this isn't grabbing me. There's clearly a hunger for this, I think, but nothing's quite grabbing me, and so I thought I'd give it a go. Grimdark. I think it's maybe not run its course completely, but I think maybe there was a bit too much of it, and so just things come in cycles. Yeah, I just don't know why when something becomes kind of big, suddenly that's the only thing that they want to publish. It just doesn't make you want to have a healthy ecosystem. Now that romantasy is the biggest thing ever, you're just going to get a glut of romantasy for about 5 years. It's going to be everywhere. People will love it, but people will also want to read other things. And if it's not in the shop, they will find it online, or they'll find it somewhere else, because you don't want to read the same thing over and over and over again. You want to mix and match, right? Most people do. So
yeah.
Oh, King Folk, yeah. I don't know when King Folk started. Actually, let me check. It was relatively recently. David is these King Folk series. Similar time frame, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, July 2021, the first book in his series. So yeah,
right.
Oh,
so yeah.
COVID
hit, and you all decided we needed more dragons in our life.
Yeah, well, I was nearing the end of the first draft of Ascendant when COVID hit, and I was like, light, horrible zombie bug plague, and people.
Right.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I did hope no one takes this too seriously. Just as
Right.
coincidence.
Now, with that said, did you use the scourge and the blight as like a metaphor for anything? Because when I read it, I kind of
Mhm.
see the blight as like the evilness in the world, corruption, hatred, jealousy, and scourge is basically anyone that has given into that and lost hope. And then sovereign represents people that like to use that power. So politicians that use hatred for one group to get you to support them, the news using fear to drive viewership and profits. And that's kind of a metaphor I placed on it while reading it. I was wondering if you
Yeah.
had any type of actual intent.
Uh, I think that's fine. I mean, the intent initially was just I wanted an enemy for the dragons that was sufficiently terrifying and and challenging. So unless dragons are fighting other dragons, you have to invent some other entity. And I decided horrible, massive zombie bugs seem, a bit goofy at first, but why not? If they're really terrifying, yeah, you might
Right.
want dragons to fight them in this, that, next thing. But I guess for me, they it is just sort of like at a certain level, it's just. I mean, nature is kind of like this. Like nature wants to kill us, but like if you let it, it will kill you. Like humans have struggled against existential
Yes.
forces of nature for a long time, whether it's famine, other diseases, and then just generally death itself. It's just like we're always got that in the back of our heads. Like there is these existential pressures at us all the time. You just kind of just crank that up to 11 and you add some personifications to that. But you're right that like people who see that and feel they lose hope or they get very bitter about it, they get very resentful about it, that like, gosh, all of this is so hard, isn't it just so pointless? That's where someone like Sovereign can lean on that. And that's where you get some of
Right.
these cultists and some characters, perhaps like Osric in the beginning,
Yep.
um, that, yes, when faced with the horrors of the world, like the world is a very dangerous place if you stop and think about it for
Yep.
5 minutes. It's kind of like when you were a kid, you don't really realize it. Everyone hits a point in adolescence where they realize that things aren't so rosy. Like someone in a family will die, maybe a family member dies for the first time, maybe they get sick for the first time. They become aware that there's war in the world, that all these things are bad, all this bad stuff is happening, has happened, will happen. And that's where you could fall into a slightly cynical despairiness and start to think, well, what's the point? Screw.
Right.
Um, and that's where like bad, dark, in quotes, fantasy goes for me. Like there was some really great dark fantasy. There were some really great books that look at that, but when it's done poorly, it sort of feels like it can feel to me a bit like you're a teenager that's learned about this for the first time, and you maybe stop listening to heavy metal or something. I don't know why else. Like you stop wearing all black and things. It's like well
Right.
done. You've recognized that the world is actually not all rosy, but the next step is like in the next step in becoming a real adult is like just getting on with it anyway. And like a lot of the series is about people trying to figure out how to get on with it anyway. um how if this was a real thing, what would happen? Obviously, in the way the series works, people have got kind of stuck, and that's where you get a lot of the friction, where people just feel like it's just this endless stucky, and we can't go any further. But the tension there is, if you try to change it, things could go horribly wrong, because just
Right.
because you've got great intentions and want to break the system and change things, and you've got a great vision and you have a dream, it doesn't always mean that the rules that are in place were there for arbitrary, stupid reasons. Like sometimes the
Right.
rules were there because generations died and fought and learned something, and you've kind of forgotten why that might have been. And so, yeah, that is the balance. So yeah, I think the scourge is like so. Just it's there to be existential, and then I play off of that with how people react to that knowledge, whether they give up, become bitter, or whether they strive on and try anyway, even if they know it's unlikely. But even if like ultimate success, like there's a line that keeps cropping up in the books, which is you can't defeat death, which is true.
Right.
And of course, if some people take that literally, they might just, well, okay, I just won't bother anything there. But actually, it's worthy and heroic to just try anyway, or at least to keep it at bay and do your best always.
Right. Point of fighting is not to win necessarily. The point of fighting is to fight, to live, to give it all you have.
It's just the point. The point of life is to make as best the time of it as you can.
Right.
Because else, what else is the point? I could probably phrase that a lot better, but you try anyway. Even faced with horrific stuff, like the whole hobbits versus Sauron and the ring and stuff. They just the little hobbits. It seems insurmountable. And one step after the other, they get up the hill. There is no other choice. You have to just keep getting back up and get back up and get back up and get back up. Because if you just lie down there, then yeah, you're right. That is a bit pointless. But it's up to you. Yeah.
Let's see. So something I've been wondering, where did the idea of a blind dragon come from?
The blind dragon came from a few things intersecting. So as I say, dragon riders to me scream the super friend trope to the extreme. So I knew that the bond had to be very, very important. And with other dragon rider stories that I'd read or dipped into, it felt like the bond was kind of perfunctory. Like there was a bond there, but it was just sort of, once it was bonded, you were bonded. There didn't always seem to be like a need for the bond itself to develop and grow and become more important. So I really wanted to lean to that because I felt like what makes the Dragon Rider fantasy a Dragon Rider fantasy is that connection. So the whole magic system in some way should revolve around the bond itself becoming stronger, and that's what would lead to greater, power and strength and whatnot. So given that, I knew, okay, so our main characters who are going to, have to go through the magic system at an accelerated rate because they're the protagonists. They better have a relationship that is so strong that you can really understand and believe that they could do what they do. And so that was kind of where I started. And then, I loved in How to Train Your Dragon that, Toothless and Hiccup, you can really feel their connection because they really need one another to function in some ways. Like Toothless needs Hiccup to fly because without Hiccup's mechanical tailwind, he can't fly. And that just felt like that was a very, very strong move on the writing. I know the books first, but speaking of the movies, it was a really fascinating way to be like, because in a lot of Dragon Rider stuff, I also wonder, why does the dragon bother bonding with a human at all? Like, what advantage does the dragon get out of this? It often seems like the dragons bond and the humans get a lot of benefit, but the dragon, I'm like, well, why would they? It's nice to have a buddy, but why? You've got all the magic and you're a dragon and you live forever. Like, what are you getting out of this? Like, why would this even start? Like, it doesn't make much sense. Why wouldn't you bond to something else? But in How to Train Your Dragon, at least with Toothless and Hiccup, it was like, yeah, okay, you see why they need each other straight away, and then why that develops into a very, very powerful friendship based on sort of need. And then so I was kind of thinking, okay, I want to emulate the How to Train Your Dragon relationship, and I want to build this in. And so I was thinking, well, how can I do it? I can't have it. They've done the tail wing thing. What else could you do? But and this was 2018 when I was thinking about the series, watching Daredevil season 3, and I love Daredevil. Thought Daredevil was bloody awesome. The Netflix show, and I just had a moment. It's like, why? Maybe the dragon could just be blind. Simple as that, really. It just felt right in my gut because it was a way that the Holt and Ash would become very, very reliant on each other and really dependent on each other. The way that Ash would really need Holt in a way that other dragons don't necessarily need their humans, particularly because they bond when they're adults usually, whereas Ash bonding with Holt as a baby is very, very unusual in this world. And blindness means he relies on him more. That that felt nice. It just felt right in the gut. It felt like the right kind of way to go, as opposed to you could have done other things. I guess there could have been other disabilities or impairments potentially, but that one just felt good because the kid, Daredevil is cool for good reason. It's kind of you can use this sensory enhancement stuff. You can kind of go down that angle. Yeah, I mean that's it. It's in a nutshell just a vector of a few things and what I wanted to get out of the characters and their relationship, and a little bit of inspiration from Daredevil and How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah, I did find that really cool how Ash truly needs Holt to begin with. He's not strong on his own, and he easily would have died early on in the book if it wasn't for Holt. And then later on in the series, they have a conversation where Ash even says, Holt, I've trusted you with my life. I need you to do the same with me.
Yep.
You need to trust me and let me help you out instead of thinking you need to protect me. That we make each other better together instead of I'm all powerful and I just come in and save the day when you get in trouble.
Yes. Yeah. A very important moment for how their bond strengthens in book 2, I believe.
Yep.
Don't want to say too much because how the bond develops is has some things to do with emotional revelations and insights, which people that have gone through 3 will be able to see that, and then in 4 I'll pretty much fully explain what those are for the most part. But yeah, that kind of that moment was that moment felt really great, especially for Ash to be like, don't need to think of me like a little baby, like I've got your back too, man. So again, because I just wanted that bond, I wanted it to work both ways. I wanted it to feel like a real two-way street. I didn't want it to feel like the dragon just sort of is giving power and protection to the rider at all times as well. Because I think that sometimes comes through. Again, I just feel like, why is the dragon doing this? But when you have the bonds work the way they do in this series, I think it's more believable to me.
Yep. And then just cleansing and forging and going through that effort of making the dragon stronger, which makes you stronger in return. And, I really like that progression element of it. And it's something that requires constant work. Like you said, it's not we're bonded and all right, we're good to go.
We're good to go. Now you got to keep working on it. You got to keep working on so for people that don't know, the dragons have magical cores. The cores relate to their magic type. In the wild, they naturally grow over time, but there are lots of magical impurities in the world that will come in, and their bodies will naturally filter them out, but it's a slow process. Whereas if a dragon has a bonded rider, the rider can, through certain meditation techniques, cleanse the impurities out of the core and forge more magic of the correct type into the core. So the core is purer and denser and stronger, and they can do that because the rider can sit there and do that pretty much whenever they get 5 minutes. Dragons of the Order are much stronger than their wild kin, sort of age to age, usually like that. There's some wild dragons that are very strong, but typically a rider's dragon will be stronger than a wild dragon for that reason. So it gives the idea that some dragons would choose to do this because maybe they want power though, because maybe it's a bad reason. It's not always pure, but if you want to fight the Scourge, some dragons nobly want the power to fight the Scourge as well. I don't know if I mentioned this one to you before, but the meditation techniques that the riders use to improve their dragon's core, their breathing techniques. Well, one specifically, but they're kind of inspired by physiotherapy breathing techniques that I use for cystic fibrosis. So with cystic fibrosis, you've got a lot of crap in your lungs, a lot of mucus and gunk and stuff like this, and you can do certain breathing techniques to help shift that and spit it out and get rid of it. So when I was writing Ascendant, I was in hospital quite bad. I was in hospital for quite a while in 2019. I had a really bad spell of ill health. And I was doing a lot of this breathing and a lot of this physio. and I just kind of was like, huh, this because I was trying to think of like, all right, they just meditate and the core gets stronger. That I need something more than that.
Right.
And I decided to incorporate some of those techniques specifically for cleansing more because that's about removing impurities. And so there's a lot of detail about them doing certain breathing and shifting things up to the back of their throat and kind of expelling it, because that's essentially what you would do with these breathing techniques to expel the gunk. So it's a nice little hot insight for anyone that didn't know.
Wow, it's really cool that you're able to take something from your own life like that and make it such a core element of the series.
Yeah. And
Awesome.
no one knows, obviously, why would they?
No.
But yeah, I like to know that it's there.
Yeah, that's a nice hidden detail. Speaking of the magic system, food. I've never seen a magic system be so reliant on food before. So that was that's a nice touch. I was waiting to find out that bacon was like this super food that enhanced everyone's magic.
It would help emeralds. It would help emerald dragons.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because it's almost like jerky. Not quite. It's almost like jerky. Probably more helpful than most types of pork. But yeah. I think doesn't Broden. Have you read the novella?
I have read the novella. Yeah.
I think Broad gets given some bacon in that by someone because it's linked to emeralds. Yeah. Really fantasy, why not? Yeah. You don't see many food-based magic systems. I thought, screw it. I quite like cooking. I quite like food and stuff like that. And I was just thinking of how can you make this different? And Holt is not a farm boy, but he's going to be some lowly servant. Like, what can he be? Like if he was like a, I don't know, he could have been anything, but it kind of felt like, well, if he's a cook's son, if he's kind of working in the kitchens, I can lean into some food stuff because I quite like that in books. I quite like doing that myself. It just helps. You can add more in that you're interested in and build up that kind of foodie magic system. And of course, like, there's lots of RPG inspired elements to the magic system, and you get a lot of, in games, you get a lot of food buffs as well as you get potions and things like that. Right? Food buffs is a big part of a lot of games, so it kind of it fit quite neatly. And yeah, hopefully it gives a nice little, hopefully it adds to that uniqueness that sets it apart from something like Aragon. Like, you've got actually a few magical systems happening kind of at once, but they all kind of connect. But yeah, and it's I do worry about running out of meat types for the dragons, but maybe some of them will have to double up eventually. I don't know.
Right. Find out that one's actually a vegetarian.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, could be one's a vegetarian.
Now I'm going to actually be looking for that in the next couple of books. So the new dragon types that are being discovered in the series, would they have existed in the past if the dragons weren't so, I don't know what the word is, elitist?
Puritanical?
Yes.
It's a very good question. Oh, maybe.
Raffo?
I honestly, maybe I would just say maybe, because it could be two ways. Look, they either existed and just kind of died out because the other dragon types got too big and too strong. Perhaps they never did, but it would seem like there's more likelihood that they did exist. But then, as the 5 main flights coalesced power, and this is I don't know. I mean, how it comes through in Defiant. I guess this is minor spoilers for people, but there's the sense of the dragons weren't always as awake and as conscious as they are now, that they were once much more just bestial and acquiring magic and gaining more power just because they're kind of hungry for it and going off and hunting for it like any other creature, but they kind of they gather it and acquire it. And like it could be that before they became kind of fully sentient, that they might have butted heads with other types. And in the way that the magic system, not that this is how it functions, but often, like if you're an elder dragon with a massive core, you pull more power to you because it's like a gravitational pull. And so it's kind of like that whole, today, what's the biblical reference to he who has everything, all will be given him, from he who has nothing, all shall be taken. That kind of inexorable pool of like when you've got a lot of power, somehow more comes to your way. More and more and more. There's a little bit like that how the cores work, right? There's a slightly dark side to how these things work. So as power coalesces into these flight types, they probably did kind of knock off some other ones, and then they think what they think of as defective eggs is sometimes just an egg of another type. Because even if you are just a fireflight and you are singing your fire song and bringing fresh dragon eggs into creation, I see the notes in the dragon song as like genetic codes, and so there's always going to be kind of random variations, right, that always pop up. There's always going to be things that are a bit different, but anything they sense difference and they think, oh, defective or diseased or wrong. But it could just be that those were other types, right? Because I guess in book 2, when those pop up, they all come from a flight, but there's different types that pop out of these flight eggs. So that they've had this kind of iron clamp down. So I've gone off on a tangent, but I guess your answer is maybe. Who knows?
Tangents are good. Go off.
That would probably make the most sense, but we'll see. I think you're probably right for that. Yeah.
That
they existed, but they were maybe driven off in the same way that other creatures in the world were driven off.
Right. That's interesting. Let's see. So 5 Paragons, 5 Elders, and you said typically per age, the ones with Dragon Riders are going to be stronger. So would you say the Paragons have the opportunity to surpass Elders? Or is there some other limitation there?
No, I don't think there's a hard limitation. Other than I kind of always envisioned the Elders as something even more special, just something like they're like a part, just somehow like they're almost their magic type personified, like that they acquired so much of it that like the Elders seem to be immortal, whereas other dragons, even other old wild dragons, aren't immortal, but the Elders appear to be immortal. Paragons are not immortal. Like Paragons, all riders live a long time, but they will die. They're still human. And their dragons could live for a very long time, but they will die. Whereas the Elders just are indefinite. They just seem to be something even apart from the other wild dragons in that sense. So I kind of see Elders as like super duper friggin' powerful, but not so horrendously powerful that Paragons can't go toe to toe with them occasionally,
right?
As may or may not happen at different points. Like as much as there is a kind of hard ranking system to an extent, I didn't want it to be. I still want a little bit of flexibility and softness in this. Once you get up to like Paragon and Elder levels, it's kind of hard to conceive of what that means. But you just know they're very, very powerful. So, as long as the matchups feel believable, I think that's fine. But I would never want to write into a system that like just because this character is power level X, that means they will automatically defeat someone else. Like if I want you to feel like on a good day, Hulk could take on someone a little stronger. If he has the advantage, maybe if he uses all his tips and tricks that he's discovered with the food and the elixirs and gets the jump on them and is smart with how he attacks and like that, you can maybe push it to the edge at the margins. But I don't want it to be so hard that you don't feel the tension in some of the fights. But I think Elders are definitely something separate. So separate and so special that given what happened at the end of book 3, we'll see some consequences for the world itself in book 4.
Yeah, I'm trying not to touch too much on the end of book 3 because
Yeah.
I don't think. I think Shad said he's read book 1 yet and not book 3, so don't want to spoil that to him.
I'm trying to keep it as vague as possible.
Yes. But yeah, we do see an example of that at the end of Ascendant with Holt and Ash going up against someone who is far more powerful than them.
Yeah.
And then I think it's early on in Unbound, they come up against someone who's also more powerful than them, but not as powerful as who they see in Ascendant, and they aren't in a position to use tricks or cleverness or first move advantage or anything, and it's like, we are just completely overpowered here.
Yeah, you got our asses kicked.
Can win under the right situation.
Yeah, the situation Ascendant that you refer to is obviously a very, very carefully calibrated situation where those people don't want to just kill them outright straight away for good reasons, and it's pitch black and there's cloud cover and all sorts of stuff. But yes, when they meet their match, they meet their match. But occasionally they can punch above their weight as well.
Yep. All right. So you mentioned the novellas, and I actually meant to start with this, but I will throw this in now. Thank you for making not only the ebook, but the audiobook free for anyone subscribed to your newsletter. It's always, I've always ranted against novellas because as someone who likes reading series, I want to read everything in the series, but I am almost strictly audiobook.
Right.
And a novella still costs a credit. It's like,
it does.
Or Dawn Shard cost me 1 credit.
Even the cash prices on those, I'll just look up Dawn Shard, for example, right? Because even the cash prices seem a bit steep, don't they? Like,
they're almost the same as a full-length book. And it's always just
like
Dawn
Shard. Dawn Shard is 7 hours long. This is a Brandon Sanderson novella, and Audible, and this is, by the way, it won't be Brandon that chooses this, it'll be Audible, but Audible has priced that as cash at $18, so more expensive than a credit. So you're still better to use a credit, but it's only 7 hours, and obviously that is definitely less value than a full-blown Stormlight book, right? Absolutely. So yeah, if you put the thing is affordable, there's no price control. They price things based off of like tiers of like how long it is, kind of. But it seems a little bit random, but vaguely the longer it is, the more expensive it is. But it depends how you publish it as well. But they always want to keep the credits the most valuable thing. So even the values they price up above the credits, so the credit seems better. So that when they run discounts, the discounts seem really appealing. Like if Audible ever put, like right now, Audible has put Ascendant on sale for the entirety of December, so you can buy it for $7.99, which is I think half the price of a credit, or something like that. So you will get a lot of cash purchases then because it's cheaper, but it's only cheaper because they have this kind of weird. They have the system that kind of hard set stuff at about $15 ish for the credits. So yeah, if I could have listed this on Audible for free, I probably would have done it that way. But you're not allowed to. You can't. There's no way to do it, unfortunately. So I had to find another means of doing it. So yeah, no, you're very welcome. I hope people obviously come and join to get them both for free, and I hope they enjoy them. I'm very happy to have worked on those this year and kind of bring them up to speed and give them the treatment they really deserved. And hopefully people get a lot out of them as well.
So for anyone watching, when should they read the novellas? For each of them?
So the Songs of Chaos novella is called Last Stand of the Stone Fist, and it's about Brode, who is the mentor figure in book 1 of Ascendant. I would suggest that you read Ascendant first and then the novella. You could read the novella first. It won't it won't completely ruin anything in Ascendant, but I think it might spoil tiny bits. I wrote the novella after Ascendant and before book 2, and I think just subconsciously you can tell that was a nice stepping stone. There are some characters that come into the novella that you would meet early in book 2, and you wouldn't have had to read the novella. It's not, it's optional reading, but I think if you read the novella and then move on to book 2, you'll get a lot more out of some of those early sections of Unbound. Some of the characters that Holt and Ash meet, for example. Read Ascendant first, then the novella for Songs of Chaos, and then move on to book 2 and 3 and so forth. With the Dragon's Blade one, you could kind of read it whenever. You could read it after the series, but if you read it before, I don't think it would spoil anything really. Like it might take away some of the tension from some of the world building questions, but not in a big way because it's so far removed. And I think it still thematically mirrors the series in an interesting way now. So whether you read it first or second wouldn't really matter. You could go either way with that.
And for anyone interested in signing up for your newsletter, I do have the link to your website in the description of this video. So just go into the website and you should get a pop-up right away that says sign up for the newsletter and receive free novellas.
Yeah.
For anyone listening,
and
highly recommend it.
Thanks, man.
Listened to Last Stand of the Stone Fist, and that had some big emotional hits in it. After reading Ascendant and then going back and seeing it, it's like, that hit hard.
Right. Yeah. Peter seemed really moved by it. I was quite taken aback. Like towards the end of I was sitting in the studio waiting to do my contributions, and I came in towards the end of the day. So I was sort of listening. I was doing other stuff in the background, but then I heard that it was stopping a lot, and I kind of looked up at this. He was crying in the booth, which I hadn't heard before. So I was like, quite taken aback by that. What was a major compliment, I suppose, if you make your narrator cry. I think the way that it reads now hopefully helps that. Like I think I made improvements to the story, and I think that shows in how it reads now. So yeah, if someone wants to sign up, they can get the ebooks as well as the audio. So it's up to you guys how you want to do it. And there will be a print version. I've put both stories into one print file, so you get both of them in a single print, which is nice. So there's not like two tiny little flimsy things. But let me get it down from the shelf. So that's the hardback copy of Last Stand of the Stone Fist, but the Huntress is also in here. So it's like 230 pages altogether. So it's a nice little extra thing. They are on pre-order now, and they'll come out 23rd of January. And Broken Binding will do a numbered 100 copies, numbered and signed as a kind of to kick things off at some point. Not sure exactly when. They have been signed. I was there. I've signed them. Obviously, it's a very busy time of year, so possibly in the new year. But I'm sure you'll see them announce that soon.
And I have to say, the cover of that really portrays.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty gnarly.
Yeah. Man standing alone in the rain. So if anyone's wondering what to expect, it's not going to be the happiest of story ever.
I think it's a good one. I think it's good to read it after Ascendant and before Unbound, just because I think it helps tonally set you up, because I never saw Ascendant as particularly cheesy, but I could see why some people might think that. And if anyone was worried about that or wondering if it gets a bit dark or whatever, like, if you go into Last Stand, you'll see like, oh right, yeah, okay, I'm gonna brace myself for some stuff like this. Like we get a little more mature and darker. Not so much that you can't read, it still has that ageless feel, I think.
Right.
but you start touching on some of the more horrible parts of maybe the world building and how people get treated and stuff like that.
It's not all rainbows and sunshine.
It's not all super friends and saving the day. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's failures in the series too. That
quite a lot. Yeah, someone
yeah.
Another booktuber who I really like, he's called the Book Guy. He's from Australia. Yep. And he did a breakdown of the series, which was really awesome. I was really impressed. He kind of said it's like grim, dark levels of failure in this high fantasy novel, which I hadn't really considered. I suppose there is a lot of failure. Yeah, they don't just win all the time.
Then why don't you, since I haven't read Dragon's Blade yet,
yeah,
what can I expect, or what's the sales pitch? Which I have seen the book guy's review of it, and
okay, you saw
that definitely moved it up my TBR. So it was already, I was already planning on reading it in 2024. Now it's in my January plans for 2024.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, my kind of pitch line that I've used for a long time is to say that it's kind of a redemption story, and it's about this arrogant dragon prince who is reborn, raised by humans instead, and has to learn to become the king that his past self never was. So, whilst there's obviously a lot of other things that happened, the kind of core story is a redemption arc for the main character over the course of the series. I really like that kind of arc. You know, I love Jamie Lannister was probably still my favorite in A Song of Ice and Fire. You know, we'll see how that pans out. Hopefully it's nothing like the TV show was. Oh my god. I do like that kind of arc. If you've read Songs of Chaos, you'll see bits of that in Osric as well. In fact, Osric's really much darker, and actually it's a bit, it's not quite as redemptive, but I guess it's that. And there is the spin on this world in Dragon's Blade is that yes, there were dragons. They were once fire-breathing, scaly creatures. But in the lore of the world, they took on human form for various reasons, and now they're stuck in that form and they can't transform back. So that they look like humans. There's nothing about them that's reptilian at all. They're not Lightbreak. They're not half dragon. They just look like humans, except that they are much faster, much stronger, kind of much physically superior. So kind of like, it's almost like a race of Captain America super soldier humans who live alongside regular humans, and there's the sort of Fae as well. And whilst there is the backdrop of the kind of demonic armies and the Dark Lord and everyone trying to band together to stop this, I think one of the things that really anchors the series and takes it hopefully up a little notch is like it's kind of really about the main character's inner conflicts and him fighting against himself as much as anything external, and the tensions between the sort of superhuman dragons and just regular humans. Like if always imagine like if a superhuman race emerged in our world, what might that be? There would be a lot of fear from the regular humans. There'd be a bit of scorn from the other ones, and how would we treat each other, and what bitternesses and what resentments might crop in. And so the backdrop feels very classic, big Dark Lord, big demon army. We got to fight this thing, which they do. But most of the real meat and potatoes conflict of the characters is like this kind of racial tensions and stuff like that that comes through. So now, obviously, it was my first series. I wrote the first book when I was 22. Published it when I was 23. So, I would say, like, I'm not trying to like put it down. Like, I think you'll notice that I was a bit younger when I was writing it, but hopefully the story is there and it pulls you through anyway. And hopefully, I think it's helpful in some ways that if people have read Songs of Chaos, they'll trust me more going in, to kind of pull the story through. But then that said, like Dragon's Blade has been very successful for me, just more under the radar. So like once it had its big break in like 2018, After that, it sold very well. In fact, it was only very recently that Songs of Chaos overtook Dragon's Blade in terms of sales for me. Obviously, accepting that Dragon's Blade has had several years head start and stuff like that, you know. But, you know, so Songs of Chaos has sold about 175, 80,000 copies. Dragon's Blade has sold about 165, almost 170 copies. So like it still sells to this day. The audiobook box set sells very, very well even now. And it chunters along, but it kind of flies completely under the radar. It hasn't developed the same kind of love that Songs has, and fair enough. But so I like to say, to be upfront, like, yeah, I think the fact that it was 22 shows a little bit in the first book and perhaps through all of them. But I think there must be, I'm proud of them, and there must be something there. Otherwise, it wouldn't be selling like this now. Like a lot of that must be word of, because I'm not like as actively pushing it and whatnot. It's definitely not fresh. I mean, it finished in 2018. That's like five years ago. That it must be partly word of mouth and people recommending it, that it still has some legs. So despite some of the rough edges, hopefully there's still a good story in there and people can engage with that.
With it being 5 years since you've completed that series, what was it like going back and writing or rewriting the novella?
It was weird at first. It felt weird at first. I thought maybe I'd made a mistake, that I was like, actually, why have I done this to myself? I can't remember stuff. But actually, after like a few awkward sessions, a lot of the knowledge just came back very naturally. Which I thought I'd forgotten everything. I sort of hadn't. There was stuff I had to look up, but not that much. And revisiting Huntress now, and improving Huntress to a place where I feel much happier with it. I was happy to recognize that, yeah, the bones of the world building and the conflicts and the stories that you could tell in this world, there's definitely a lot there. And I felt like I got stuff out of the novella. And it's the sort of thing of like, if I could just freeze time and go back and kind of do what I did to the Huntress for the whole of the trilogy, I would. Right. Obviously, that doesn't make sense, but I feel like, yeah, there was good ideas. It's a good story. You know, whatever roughness I had, you'll see the difference between the Huntress, I think, and Dragon's Blade a little bit. But you know, there's plenty there. I like the magic system in that. It's very soft, but very, very consequential, which I think is really cool. So yeah, it was very rewarding to do the Huntress, because it kind of it was actually quite reassuring to know that the bones of this were really quite good, and you should be quite happy with it. And yeah, never mind what your inner critic says at this point. Yeah.
Everyone's always their toughest critic, but it sounds like a very original idea, and I
think so.
I cannot wait to actually start.
Almost too original. I think what got me at first was it was kind of hard to picture it, and people, you know, like people say they want something really different, but if you actually see what their behavior is, they actually sort of don't.
Right.
It's kind of right. It was really hard to pitch the series at first. People just weren't interested in it because it was kind of they couldn't relate it to something else, because there hasn't been anything. They were like, well, there's dragons. I don't like dragons. I'm like, yeah, but they're not like they're different. And they're like, no, if it's dragons, I don't want to talk about it. And then people that really like dragons were like, well, there's no dragons, mate. So why did you?
Right.
It was kind of like, I was like, oh no, I've pushed the two camps apart. Somehow eventually it did find its space, and it's done very well for me. But yeah, it was difficult to find its feet, because it is actually kind of unique, which is not actually as big a help as you might think. Yeah, because I can't think of anything still that would fit the bill. A really addictive magic system, like that magic is like a drug, like a really hard drug. Like, we're not talking like, oh, I get a little bit tired and stuff. It's like, no, they become full on fanatic addicts that, like, will kill themselves pretty much if they go too far with it. So yeah, I am proud of it, and I'm much more proud of it now, having gone through Huntress, which might seem bizarre to say. but it's very different from songs. So some people who really love songs, who just love all that, they kind of bounce hard off Dragon's Blade because it is very different. It doesn't have the same kind of vibe, So, but I still think it has the ageless epic tone, which I think is where it sits. So, I'll be curious to see what you think of the whole thing. I do sort of think that the reason why it succeeded once it was a completed trilogy is because it is kind of like one very big story that required the whole thing there before you could really get a sense of maybe how how it was going to come together. So I'll be really interested to hear what you think.
Yep. I'm currently debating if I want to just binge the whole series in January or if I'm spreading it out some. So shouldn't be too long either way, though.
Okay.
So,
okay.
I mean, I ended up binging Songs of Chaos, even though I did not plan on doing that. So I read Ascendant, and then I think I tried like 3 or 4 other books and put them all down within one chapter. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to Unbound. This is clearly what I want to be reading. Screw the TBR. Let's get through what's actually calling to me.
Oh, right. Well, I think it's the biggest compliment I could get. So I mean, that's great. Thank you.
Yep.
I do hope that if people, I know I think readers just blaze through them for the most part. But yeah, I think if people like Ascendant, I would say try and get onto Unbound as quick as you can, because like Unbound kind of shows you the full picture of like what to expect in some ways. Like you get the full sense of everything, the tone, how deep the magic goes, how deep the characters are going to go, like all of that. So like it's if you wanted to take a break there, you could, but I think try to get into Unbound and give that a go, and then you'll really know whether it's for you or not as a whole. Yeah.
Right. So do you have a favorite book of yours, or is it like trying to pick a favorite child?
Of my books.
Yeah.
Oh man.
As in one, let's phrase it in two different directions. So a favorite book is in like you really like the story, and then your favorite book is in the one you enjoyed writing the most.
Okay. Oh, that's really hard. I think there's bits of each of Songs of Chaos that I like, and maybe it's just recency bias, but I think Defiant is my favorite for dancing right at the edge of like keeping it in the tone that I want and not making it get so grim or whatever, but having sufficient consequences that this is like serious and it's not super fluffy or whatever like that, and the sort of giving some twist, but they're not total subversions. Like I'm not pulling the rug out from under you, hopefully, but you're like, I did not think that was going to happen.
Right.
Especially like maybe if you thought Ascendant was a little happy clappy or something, relatively to that. I think I've taken a lot of work to try and to just dance on that knife sense of, oh well, this is a bit more than I thought it was going to be, while still fitting in all my magic system stuff and still fitting in all the character ups that I like. And I was really happy with Hope's one of Hope's big revelations in Defiant, which is when he's making, without spoilers, when he's making his sword during the wedding. I think that's a really important moment for a young male character to go through, and I don't see it very often. And I was very happy to do that in a way that I think worked well. Could be recency bias. In terms of writing, though, Defiant was like hell on earth. So, in terms of actually writing, the book I actually enjoyed writing the most was this one that no one knows about, which is Battlespire, which is my standalone lit RPG story. Which is this is like Ready Player One or World of Warcraft meets Die Hard. Like literally, that's what it is. It's very. There's so many Die Hard references in it that it's almost silly. But this is it's short for me. It's like 120,000 words. Obviously, it's like RPG, so you've got all the stats and the mechanics and things like this. It's first person, which is I'm not used to either. But I wrote this book in about 3 months, and it was the most enjoyable experience I've had writing anything because it just poured out. Like I don't know, like changing to first, having a modern character that can use modern day references, which is helpful. You don't have to think in high fantasy references all the time. Putting in all that kind of MMO RPG gaming stuff and putting my getting some ideas in there and playing around with that. And it being a really kind of short, fast thing. Still with it, which I hope this was my first big experiment with the hero's journey. I think it worked well, and then I kind of did it again in Ascendant. I just love writing this. It was a lot of fun. Partly because the world building, because it takes place inside a game. The world building doesn't have to be as crazy consistent and as thought through because it's a game. So I can add in some crazy stuff because why not, right? It doesn't have to be this like beautifully consistent world, like structured world that's organic. It's like it's being forcibly created in the universe. So it allowed a lot of freedom. It allowed a lot of modern day language, which was easy. It allowed a bit of extra humor. You could put in a lot more, modern references. There's a lot of Die Hard references. There's lots of Iron Man references because he kind of thinks of himself as Iron Man. That's the one I enjoyed the most because I wrote it the fastest, and so I think that one will always still be my favorite to write because of just how free it felt, how there wasn't any pressure on it. Like it just sort of, after I finished Dragon's Blade, I started writing this maybe like a couple of months after the Dragon's Blade 3 came out initially, and it just poured out really quickly. Yeah, in a way that no other book has done that. Like Ascendant was a really hard book to write. Unbound wasn't as hard as Ascendant, and then Defiant was the hardest thing, and it took a long time for a bunch of reasons. But I think it shows. I think they're getting better and better and better. But how challenging they were definitely docks down and not as enjoyable, even if I think they're better. I like Battlespire. I like it a lot. I would have wrote. The plan originally was to do a sequel to Battlespire and kind of have that as a series, and have Ascendant and kind of have that as a series. Ascendant originally was meant to be a lot shorter, more like 90,000 words, and potentially try to pitch it to YA publishers because they like it to be really quite short. But I was a bit ill in 2019, so I lost time to focus back to back and stuff. I was still working with Portal books back then too, so that was taking time. And then Ascendant just naturally just kind of kept growing and got bigger. And once it got bigger, I was like, well, the YA publishers won't have it because it's too long. Or that's what they would say. Like you might have been able to run that gamut, but probably not. They would have treated me like a debut and been like, no, that's too long, just reject instantly. Adult publishers probably wouldn't have taken it. And by that point, I found success self-publishing and just kind of batted on through. But it did mean Battlespire got kind of left. But thankfully, it's a complete standalone story as it is, so it doesn't feel too bad that one has been unfortunately left at the wayside. But yeah, because no one knows about it, I like to mention it from time to time. See if anyone.
Well, I just added to my TBR. I need more standalones in my life.
Yep.
Welcome, Jordan. Boiled jellyfish.
The boiled jellyfish.
Someone I've been trying to get to pick up your books. He has them on his 2024 plans.
Excellent. So 2024.
Yeah, I haven't heard of Battlespire.
Yeah, well, you probably wouldn't like it. It's
I'll give it a try at least.
Well, it's interesting that I don't know how people, it's one of these eternal questions. How do people find books? How do they become aware of books? It's actually, I wish I could find a way to really study that, because I think often the way we assume they do probably isn't true. And I think for a lot of people, it probably is just they're browsing on Amazon or Audible, or they finish a book and Audible or Amazon sort of there's a few pop-ups to be like, hey, you might like, this, and I think it's still more algorithmic than we like to think. And I would have thought that maybe every so often they might have popped this one up, but no, I mean, I guess if they pop anything up after songs, it will be Dragon's Blade, and then Battle Spire kind of gets siloed off somewhere else. I don't know. But yeah, you wouldn't know it was there. But it's there. Happy with it. Wish I could have continued it, but definitely works as a standalone, and that's nice to have as well from time to time.
That's an interesting topic of how people find books. Because for me,
Yeah.
it was
So
always just word of mouth to begin with. Because I didn't like the Amazon recommendations or anything like that because they're not personalized. So I never trusted them. As in, it's not a person that I know trusting who knows my taste, and then through word of mouth and a book challenge that I was in with one of my friends, we would have like 20 random categories, and one of the categories was a book with a dragon in it. Now, at the time, I had read basically zero fantasy outside of Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings in middle school and high school. Hadn't read any fantasy. And one of my coworkers kept telling me to read Wheel of Time. Like once a week, she would bring up Wheel of Time, Wheel of Time, Wheel of Time. So I eventually look up the back of it, and I see something about the Dragon Reborn, and I have this category of a book with a dragon in it. I'm like, you know what? It's gonna knock out two birds, one stone. And by the time I finished the third book, I had decided there aren't any actual dragons in this series. But I was committed.
Did you take your box anyway, or did you?
I did not. I ended up reading Aragon.
That's very studious of you. Yeah, it's very honest of you.
So that year I read Wheel of Time and Aragon. So no fantasy to those two. And then I was coming up at the point where my Audible credits were about to expire. And like, okay, I need to find 3 books to order. Well, this Sanderson guy seemed to do all right with Wheel of Time. Let's see if he has any good stuff on his own. So I got the first 3 books of Wheel of Time, or Stormlight Archive. Binged through all of those, and it was right before Rhythm of War came out. So then I went right to Rhythm of War. And then I needed more Stormlight Archive, which led me to BookTube. And now I never have to look for another book to read because the recommendations are just nonstop coming in.
Yeah. Interesting pathway. I bet that's the pathway of a lot of people in some ways. But yeah, someone just badges you with a recommendation until you do. I mean, I think word of mouth probably is still the most important one. But then again, you're saying those algorithm systems aren't personalized. They're not, but a bit like how scary. It's a bit like how scary the social media platforms kind of know what you want to see. I think they do know what you kind of want to read. Like when I mentioned that Paolini photo got into an Aragon Facebook group, and it had a really huge engagement. It was really quite taken aback. So many people came onto that to say, "Oh, Audible keep recommending your book to me, and I've been on the fence or whatever, or I haven't picked up for whatever reason, but now I'm going to because I've seen this, this post and stuff." And so and they are very linked, those two. And so if Audible is pushing people that way, they know what they're doing. It is that is true. So I think that does play a big part of it. But then after that's got to be word of mouth. But then how do you can't track it? You have no idea what's going on. And so how people find books and then how they buy books is really, really interesting. It's almost like if you could figure it out, you could, it would help. But it's so ethereal. In some ways, it's so ethereal. This question? My pathway was getting a Kindle and finding Kings of the Wild advertised for $2 on Reddit Fantasy. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's also really great. Reddit used to be quite good for letting people promote discounts and stuff, and then they kind of clamp down. You know, I guess it got so big that everyone wants to do it, so every day you'd be getting flooded. So I understand why they do it, but yeah, there was a nice time where you could promote on Reddit discounts and deals and stuff like that, and that was definitely effective. I think it actually helped the Dragon's Blades box set. It was doing well, and then it got onto Reddit, and then it really blew up. But this was like 2018. The rules have changed now, but okay, that's an interesting. And then what? So after you got Kings of the Wild, boiled jellyfish, that was it. You were hooked. We'll see if he types something in.
Yeah,
that's an interesting pattern. So after Stormlight, what did you move on to next, Patrick?
So Stormlight is when, let's see, I found Daniel Green and Murphy Napier and went to their top 10 lists. Let's see. And basically, okay, they're like Rage of Dragons was on there. First Law was not the one I immediately went to, but I ended up being disappointed in it because it was, with all the hype around First Law, I was expecting the next Stormlight Archive. And
right. Well,
they're
not
doing
very
similar
different
at
things,
all.
right? It's
yes.
No, but it's kind of like the equivalent of of that more gritty, dark space, but they're so different. I take it you prefer the more high fantasy, high magic kind of books. Is that just kind of where your preference lies?
Urban fantasy. So
you like
Resident
urban?
Files,
Okay.
Alex Verus. So yeah.
I need to
obviously
try more
after Stormlight, you haven't tried Resident Files yet?
No, I need to read more. I listened to the first one earlier this year. I was trying a bunch of book ones. I tend to, when I get the chance, I try to do a lot of book ones, and if I don't move on, it's not because I didn't like the book or anything. I feel like I'm trying to sample more stuff if I can. But I probably, because they're quite short, I'll probably try and read a few more. Supposedly they get better and better, right? That's why I hear.
Generally, yes. So I feel the big, downside, the detriment to Dresden Files is that the people that love Dresden Files talk about how great it is. And then people go into the first book expecting this great series.
Right.
And it hasn't built to that yet. Like the first few books,
I thought it was good.
Right, they're good.
Yeah,
they're just not great, so people get disappointed. They're like, I don't get what the hype is. And even myself, I list Dresden as one of my top 5 series, but I almost DNF'd the series after book 2. Book 1 was good. Book 2, I'm like, I don't like where this is going. But I was in a readathon at the time, and I needed another short book that I could fit into like the last 2 days of the month. Like, okay, I'll just go back to book 3. And it's like, oh, I'm enjoying this again. And then from there, it just keeps growing. And books 10 through 12, that's probably one of, if not my favorite story arc in all of fantasy. But you don't get that till
you gotta get 10 books there,
right? To get to my favorite. Now, you'll hear people say, "Oh, with book 4, there's a huge jump," and there is a jump between book 3 and 4. Not just in the book, but the narrator as well, James Marsters. Around book 4 is when he truly becomes Harry Dresden, and even if I'm reading it, I still hear his voice. And then book 7 is when it goes from, okay, this is good to this is great. If you get through book 7 and you're still not really feeling the series, okay, it's probably not for you. Which it's hard to say, hey, get through book 7 before you decide. But I'm not saying if you think all of them are bad, DNF the series. But if you're like, this is good, just not great, then continue. What's wrong with reading a good book?
Yeah, I often wonder that. I think, and you can let me know what you think about this. I think sometimes with I think fantasy and the fantasy readership and how we interact with it, and I talk about myself as a reader here too. That sometimes our expectations are a little too high in general, like that. Whatever the series was that had us kind of really fall into the genre and fall in love with it, really resonates in our brain. And if that was in childhood, especially, it's going to be really hard to overcome that. Like that first series that really grabbed you,
Right.
is on a pedestal, and what you're actually hoping is that everything you read is going to be like that or better. That like we're kind of hoping to return to the maybe every reader is like that with their preferred genre. Maybe it's not just fantasy, but I think we have that a little stronger because there's that element of the mythological and a little bit larger than life and something that feels almost spiritual in it in somehow and in some way. Like you're hoping that this is going to be the next thing that is the big thing and it's the best thing and that. But that's only going to come along maybe once in a generation or so, and so there's a slight harshness sometimes. I think when like a book is good, but it wasn't the best book you've ever read.
Right.
And it's sometimes we're a little harsh on things. What do you think? I mean, I think I've had that tendency. I think sometimes too. So
Absolutely. And
yeah,
now that I've been doing obviously a lot more reviewing of books, there's this pressure that anytime you give something 4 stars, well, what's wrong
yeah,
with it? Why isn't it a 5-star rate? I mean, and you have to
yeah,
pinpoint what specifically is wrong to give something 4. And sometimes, like, there's nothing wrong with the book. It just, for whatever reason, it didn't pull you in like your favorite book of all time. But since you can't define what's wrong with it, people start to default to, oh, it's still a 5-star read. Everything was fine with it. And then it becomes when you do give something 4 stars, oh, well, that's a horrible book now because it went at 5 stars. It's like, well, you
yeah.
have a
I
whole
mean, there
spectrum
is
of
that. Yeah,
5.
yeah. Well, there is that too. There is I mean, I think the star rating system is a bit broken. I mean, I would prefer it if on Amazon or Audible it was like Steam, if it was just thumbs up, thumbs down,
Right.
and then the written review. And so, like, if you see that 98% of people have a thumbs up, that's bloody amazing. And you
Right.
would kind of have, I think that'd be a slightly more nuanced metric because I find with the star ratings that, yeah, everyone, like, if I was to, so like I went through First Law this year as well. I tried it years back and bounced off of it. I tried it again this year and listened to the whole thing straight through. Uh, you know, I just clicked with it this time. Really enjoyed the prose, loved his style, loved the whole thing. But how it ends and ultimately, overall, it isn't like what I love out of a book or a series. It's not the exact tone I'm looking for. But if you put a gun to my head, I would give it probably 5 stars just out of like the sheer gravity, like just how well it was doing what it was doing, you know, and what an achievement I think it is, even though it wasn't like my personal thing. But if I was going off a pure personal thing, I would give it a lower star rating. But
Right.
I try not to do that. I try not to do that personally because what the author was trying to, I'm like, did they succeed in telling the story that they were trying to tell? It doesn't matter if that wasn't my cup of tea. Like if they pull it off really well, I can recognize that. And maybe that's because I do this myself, so I can be a little bit one objective side on and one subjective side on at the same time. I can kind of see the difference. But yeah, you get that because like if everyone rates personally, the star rating is a bit amorphous and it doesn't necessarily matter. And yes, it can be difficult. I would say like I think when people, especially when that interacts with the Goodreads and Amazon, right? If you put a 3 star onto those platforms, you're telling the platform that you think that book is dog shit. I know people don't like to hear that, but
Right.
that's what those stars mean to the systems. It doesn't matter what you personally think. The way that the averaging scores work. Like if you 1 star a book on Amazon or Goodreads, the author would probably have to get something like 30 or 45 stars to outweigh that 1 star in terms of how things average out. Like
Yeah.
it's harsh. They don't know that you have a personal rating system. So it definitely has a, yeah, it's an imperfect world. It's an imperfect system. But I can imagine that, that's why I don't want to review books. I think it was. I don't know why I would do it. It'd be too difficult. It'd be far too difficult. I actually really like how. I really like how Book Guy does it, actually, in that he just talks about the series and its pros and cons, and he never gives a star rating ever. He just kind of lets you decide what you think about it based on what he's talked about, which I think is a nice way to do it, because I think sometimes you can, you get those reviews where it's like the extremes, like you'll get like a review that's like 4 stars and it's gushing, like, this is the best book I've read all year, blah, 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 blah. You get a lot of that, and then you're like, why is it 4?
Right.
And then you sometimes get like, you sometimes will get an extreme other end where it's like a 5-star review, but it's just full of nitpicking and people criticizing it all the way down, but somehow it's still a 5. And you're like, how does this compute? I like that he just talks and just leaves it and just kind of lets you make up your own mind or go and read it for yourself. I think that's nice, because again, this is something that even though I know all this and I write and I'm aware of all these systems, if someone talks really positively about a book but then comes in with like a 3-star or 3.5-star rating, I think, oh, what, why? Like, and it does put me off. There's a little bit of me that goes, oh, well, maybe I won't bother then. But even though they've just been super positive, just because those ratings are so, I don't know, etched into our heads, which is clumsy. And I wish we had a slightly better system than we do.
There's a new review site that I've started to use. I think it's Story Lace. Where instead of instead of star ratings, they do ratings out of 100, which that you still get the same subjective. Like I've never given a book 100, and I rate for the past 2.5 years. I do everything out of 100, and Words of Radiance is my top one at 99. But like anything above an 83 generally ends up being in the what I would consider a 5-star range. But it also has a, do you recommend this book? Yes, no. So where you want the thumbs up, thumbs down, it has that too. So it will say average rating of this book is 87 and 92% of people recommend it. 3% don't recommend it. And then the rest didn't participate in that part of the review. So it kind of gives that both worlds for both type of readers. Do you want this basic rating, or do you want how many people would actually recommend the book?
Yeah, that's nice. I wish the numbers just went there. I think thumbs up, thumbs down. Personally, I think just make it like Steam. If I was in charge, but I think that's definitely better than the 5-star system, for sure.
Because I mean, again, this is going to come down to personal rating. But what I do for my 100 is I have categories, and one of them is just pure enjoyment, and that's worth 25 points.
Yeah.
So, because ultimately, I feel like if a book's not enjoyable to me, even if it accomplishes what it wants to do, I don't think I can give it a 5-star review. Because if you're looking at my review and what I think of something to determine if you're going to like it, I have to factor in whether or not I liked it. So from that perspective, that makes up a fourth of it. But then there's world building, plot, characters, either just plain readability or narration, which again, most of mine's going to be, I'm rating the narration. So just stuff like that. So it factors into the overall score, but the overall score isn't all of it. Like
sure. So like, if you mostly listen to books, do you have a favorite narrator?
Tim Gerard Reynolds is my favorite narrator.
Okay, yeah, he's the common favorite, isn't he? Yeah.
I have to come up with a new list because I've had him as my favorite for like 2 years, and I haven't really
Time to pick
looked
it up.
into it because I've been doing a lot more self-published books. Which, when you do that, you're not getting Tim Gerard Reynolds, you're not getting Michael Kramer. So I've
Not
gone
typically.
right. Sometimes you do, and I'm sure they do that because there's going to be people there say, "Hey, TGR narrated this. I'm going to go check it out."
Oh yeah, I mean, you get that with TGR, you get that with Nick Poldell, even Peter Kenny, the guy who narrates Songs of Chaos to an extent because he narrated The Witcher. You get a little bit of inbuilt like social credit. You're like, oh, I'll have a look because I liked how he did that other series. I've never heard of a series, but if it's the same, maybe I'll like that because it's the same. It helps. It definitely helps. It's undeniably helpful that if the narrator has worked on some really great stuff, you get a little leg up in terms of just getting people over the line for sure. Like it's really helpful.
But with doing more of the self-pub, I have a much more varied experience with narrators now, and it's actually become kind of rare for me to have a narrator that's doing multiple series that I read within the same year. So I have to go back and it's like, okay, so that's something that like I rate the narrator. Now for that, I just do 0, 1, or 2. Because I don't want to judge the book too harshly on how the narrator did. But being an audiobook listener, again, it factors into the enjoyment. So I can look back at, okay, who's all the narrators I rate their narration to and what do they do? And, oh, this person keeps showing up. Whereas right now I might not even, I couldn't even list that. So this year, Drew Hayes has been an author that I've read over 20 books from this year. He has 5 different series, and I think each series has a different narrator. And I've liked all of them, but I couldn't name any of them because it was only for that series, and I haven't seen the name again. So it's hard for me to list my favorite outside of TGR because he's the only one that I.
Well, that's okay. I asked for
I know you did.
That's fine. TGR. Yeah, that works.
Yeah. I know he did all of Michael J. Sullivan's, which you can't see because they're behind your book, Red Rising. Been a few others that I've checked out, again, because he was the narrator.
I have had a strange time with him because there's some books that I tried with him as narrator, the samples, I was like, I don't know why this isn't doing it for me, but I listened to Red Rising this year and I was like, okay, right. This one worked for whatever reason for me, and I went for that book and I was like, I can see why he's a very beloved narrator now. So I definitely understand that one, man. Yeah, he's excellent. Booked solid, I think, is a way of putting it in terms of if you were trying to get a hold of him. I see someone's asking about songs. Oh, go on.
Even Sullivan has mentioned that in order to get TGR to narrate his books, they schedule him out a year in advance, which means he has to have the book written and done before that timeline comes.
Yeah. I mean, there's some narrators like that. Nick Poldell's like that. Travis is like that. Some of them just get so much work that you have to. You can get a slot. You can get a slot a year out, but you better bloody make it because that slot will go. I'm fortunate that Peter does well, but he's not quite so booked. So there's a little more flexibility. I've always hit my deadline with him, but I can usually get it when I need it, which has been nice. I see a question here. Someone asking how the writing for Songs of Chaos 4 is going. It's going okay, actually. I know that it doesn't sound too enthusiastic, but it is. I've just been busier than I thought. There's been lots of cool things happening, some of which hopefully I can talk about sometime soon. We'll see. And so the novellas took a little bit longer to produce than I thought. That took up some time, but I'm glad that they're out now. I had a couple of speed bumps. Once I got to 50,000 words, I hit a couple of speed bumps, which is kind of normal because you're kind of over the initial easier opening sections. So I've just recently passed 75,000 words into the draft. I'm hoping to get to 100,000 by New Year's, but we'll see. Obviously, it's Christmas. But I would say on the whole, it's progressing steadily and overall smoother than Book 3 did. Book 3 was just really hard for a whole bunch of reasons, and I would say this one has been going a bit smoother. I should have it out a lot quicker than Book 3 was. I'm hoping for the end of next year, so like maybe October, November, maybe into December next year. It depends, obviously, like because I work closely with Audible on these launches now. Fortunately, they do so well in audio that I have a bit more direct contact with Audible and the teams and the promotional teams there. And hopefully that kind of support will come for Book 4 as it did for Book 3. And they like to book those things out quite far ahead, 6-7 months ahead. So I don't like to say start booking it until I'm confident I'm going to make it. But that, so even if I finish the book, which say at some point there might be a wait for that, but it's obviously worthwhile from my perspective. So yeah, I'm hoping end of next year for the release, but I won't make any promises I can't keep. But it should be doable. It's coming along easier, and hopefully it'll be shorter than 3.2, which will help. With Book 3, I mean, Book 3 was 250,000 words, but the original raw drafts came out at like 300,000 words. So it was 300,000 words of stuff that I then cut down to 250. And if you think about, I obviously spent a lot of time overwriting, and then I had to spend a lot of time cutting it all out again. Obviously, not all at once, but like that must have been several months of writing and editing that was just sort of unnecessary, but that's the way it panned out. So even cutting out that kind of fat, hopefully, will mean it's a quicker process overall. Book 3 was the difficult middle child because it's right in the middle of the series. And hopefully, it's a little easier. Touch wood. Some wood.
Yeah, I can imagine with editing. I mean, obviously, completely different, but just with making videos, like if I film a 20-minute video and it only use 12 minutes of the footage, it's like, oh, this is going to take me way longer to edit than I actually want to.
Sure. Yeah. If you could get it closer to the length it was the first, you're not overdoing time, you're not editing. Yeah, it's the same same thing, but maybe rather than like a matter of days, it's months and months and months.
Right. Yes.
With these the big ass books.
Instead of talking hours, we're talking months. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? I wonder, because we've touched on the core, the bond magic works and the cores and the food magic to just a little bit. What did you think of the blacksmithing sort of magical element of the series? Bit of a vague question, but I just wondered what you thought about it, of those scenes. And
I enjoyed it. Like it gave you like a kind of like a different view of the characters, like a different angle, and just how personalized that process is, and what it's like when you have a dragon there helping you versus nope, go do it on your own. And so yeah, I enjoyed those scenes. So.
Very character-rich scenes they turned out to be, which was very nice. I wouldn't like them to just be grinding through the process. It would be a bit boring, but you can turn them into something special. I did a lot of research for those, and I won't bored other people with the whole backstory. But they're some of my favorite scenes. I think my favorite scene in Book 2 for sure is Osric making his axes, and some of my favorite scenes in Defy are Holt making his sword and then making his second sword.
Right.
And they're really nice. They're really nice to write. In the end, I worried about them, but they're some of my favorite parts. But I don't see people specifically talk about even just the system or the ideas too much. I just like to see what people think in case I'm completely bewildered, off track. But
No, I
Glad you
definitely
like them.
enjoyed them. I'm more of a plot-driven reader generally.
Right.
So for me, it was the right amount of touch of, okay, we're gonna really zero in on characters for this portion, and then we'll get back to the plot.
Right.
Um, Whereas if it
Interesting.
was like a whole book of
A whole
blacksmithing,
a whole book of
um,
blacksmithing would be too much. It's
right,
interesting because I do think at heart somehow I'm a character driven author. Even there's plot and stuff, but I find it very hard to progress, and I find it very hard to write any chapter or any scene unless I can get to grips with like, why is this? What's the character angle here, or like, why is this?
yes,
If I can't get that straight, I find it very hard just to write a plot. Like, if it's just raw plot and there's not a lot of character work, I feel like it's not very good. So I've struggled with that. So I think like subconsciously always kind of push more character work into everything because it feels just stable to me unless I do that. But that has the effect of like, yeah, it maybe slows little bits down here or there or whatever. But just to me, like, yeah, I think they're more character driven stories than they might look in first valueness, just because I love the art. I need to know where we're going with each book and and the characters are going to change. Like it's I don't think I've got any static characters really. Like all of them
right,
tend to be quite different from where you first met them, and that's very important to me.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've had I've always kind of struggled with even saying plot character or plot driven versus character driven because I don't think any reader is going to like any book that just focuses on one or the other. Like you have this great storyline, but the characters are just bland characters. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't think even the most plot driven writer is going to like that. It needs to be the right balance of yes, you have a storyline, here are the characters, here are their motives, here's why they're doing what they're doing. Here's here's who they are and how that impacts where the plot's gonna go. So you need
Yeah.
that right balance.
Yeah. Well, it's a sliding scale. Like everyone, people say they prefer this kind of magic to that kind of magic, but it's
Right.
usually somewhere in the scale that's just like maybe a certain book is a little bit too much salt in one direction. But yeah, you're right. The worst, nothing could be purely plot driven. I mean, purely plot driven would be like a classic James Bond movie or something, where it's just plot. Like that isn't.
Right.
The newer ones were a bit more character driven compared to usually I guess a plot driven novels where the character is kind of static and isn't changing, but that's deliberate, and that's like Sherlock Holmes is not a character driven story. uh he's a very interesting character, but he isn't it's not his journey that's driving the story. It's all about the mystery and watching him being awesome is kind
Right.
of the enjoyment, as opposed to seeing him develop.
Yeah. Like I use Michael J. Sullivan kind of as my scale where I'll say Raya Revelations is very much plot driven. And then I'll get pushback with people saying, well, Royce and Hadrian are two of my favorite characters in fantasy. I'm like, yeah, they're great characters, they have great banter, but the story really isn't that much about them growing as a character. But then
Right.
if you go
Yeah.
to his Legends of the First Empire and then eventually the Rise and Fall, it is very much zeroed in on characters and their growth and what actions they take and how they influence the plot. And so it's like, yeah, you can have great characters in a plot driven book.
Oh
And
yeah,
you can have an
oh yeah, absolutely.
interesting
Yeah,
plot
yeah.
in a character driven book. Uh,
Yeah, that was just without. Yeah, that's kind of like what we're talking about with star ratings and stuff. People have slightly different ideas of what a term means. So if you say plot driven, they think, what, the characters are bad? No. That's not what it is. It's not what we mean.
right.
Yeah, but yeah. You can absolutely have fantastic characters who don't change. They're really fun to read or watch. Definitely, 100% possible. The same way you could have, and equally you can have not a lot happening, but a character is very interesting and goes for, you probably want to be somewhere in the middle and marry those, or you probably want to do both of those things really well. That's probably the best way if you can nail it. But that's very difficult.
Yeah. Like, I'd like to hear someone try to argue one way or the other on Stormlight Archive. Is it character driven or is it plot driven? No, it's great in both. It has a great storyline with great characters that are changing throughout. You don't have to be one or the other. But yeah, for me, the blacksmithing moments, it was a nice like break of, okay, let's zero in on the characters, really dig deep into their mindset and their emotional state, and then okay, let's get back to the rest of the world. So yeah, they worked for me.
Okay, I'm glad. I'm very glad.
So one last question I wanted to ask, and this is more about self-publishing, specifically since we were talking about narrators. And because I am almost an exclusive audiobook listener that listens to a lot of self-pub, but there are a lot of self-pub authors that don't go the audiobook route, understandably, because it costs quite a bit of money to put out an audiobook. What was your reasoning for doing it when you first went audiobook, and what would your advice be?
I'm glad you've touched on this, because actually audiobook stuff, indie publishing audiobooks, is a little bit of a hobby horse that I'm trying to talk about a bit more. I always get the opportunity. So I'm in a fortunate position where audio is the bulk of my income, and actually probably the bulk of my unit sales too. So it's not. It used to be it was the bulk of my income because I got more money out per sale. But now it sells more copies than even ebook does, and it's more money than an ebook gives. So that's really great. I'm very, very fortunate to be in that position. I kind of stumbled accidentally into it in some regard. Like when I first released Dragon's Blade 1, 2, and 3 on their own did not perform very well. Let's say no one was gagging to record them. I wasn't getting any offers to record them, but I really wanted audiobooks because I like you, I prefer listening to audiobooks than reading. Partly, I think I don't know if you're the same. I feel I take information in better when I'm listening. So I really enjoy podcasts and other things like that. I feel like at school or university, if we had AI then, and I could have had something be read to me, as a PDF read out in a nice voice, I would have probably got the information a lot better than reading it. So I've always loved audio. So I wanted my books to be in audio, but if no one's going to make you an offer to record it, you're going to have to go and find. So I originally did a royalty split with Dave, Dave Cruz narrates Dragon's Blade. I found him on ACX, which is the kind of self-publishing platform for writers for audio. You can put your book up there and host it and get auditions and stuff like this. Dave was willing to go the royalty split route, which is just 50-50. And ACX handles that. So the money that comes from Audible, ACX is owned by Audible, so it's all the same thing. It just splits the payments up to you and to the narrator, so you don't have to worry about handling payments or anything like that, and it's quite smooth that way. Now we did that, and more because the series just hadn't caught on yet. Obviously, they weren't doing like spectacularly well. But when I got to the time of wanting to do the box set, I re-edited the book one really heavily. So before I put everything out as a box set, I went back to book one, really heavily rewrote sections of it and edited it in 2018 after having finished the third one. So tidied it up, definitely improved it. There's only so much you can do with a big polish. You can completely restructure it, but definitely helped. And it was a really good decision because I think that helped ultimately with the box set success. Because I had done that, I later discovered that you could also do the same thing in audio and do a box set in audio. This is rarer to see because studios don't typically want, publishers and studios typically don't want to box set things because, yeah, in the best case, you don't want to have to box set anything because you will be condensing the sales. But for me, trying to find my feet, it made a lot of sense. So I wanted to do the audio box set and ebook did extremely well. And I was like, well, I'll do an audio version now, but this was like a year later. By that point, I'd obviously got some money because the box set had been so successful. I asked Dave to re-record the first book, and we worked out a deal where he would re-record the first book and also give me permission to make the box set out of all the other editions, and I would just take that as like a self-published full title. So that's like so as I kind of slightly backdoor way, I got an audio box set of 46 hours for not having paid the full recording cost of the whole thing. More like a bump up payment for re-recording all of book one. The single titles are still there and they still trickle through. So Dave has continued to get some royalties from those titles, but it was a weird way to get a box set cheaper than you normally would. And then during COVID, I saw people were advertising things. I started advertising mine, and again, unusually, it took off in a way that other box sets I haven't seen take off or stick to the same extent. I don't know quite. It's one of these things I'm not entirely sure. Other than hopefully, like as I said earlier, it's actually better than I think it is in my head, and people like it and recommend it and things like that. But so once it started selling well on Audible during COVID, it's just kind of kept going and kept going. And around that time, I was thinking, what should I do with Ascendant? And once I'd found success in audio this way, I was like, well, actually, these rights are worth quite a lot to me now. I can see that if I get the same level of success, or even something similar, I can see that there's money to be made in audio now. So I'm going to keep the rights to Ascendant, and I'm going to record that, which was really close because that set took off in May of 2020. I started to think about the publication of Ascendant around the same time. So I could have very easily sold, up until about that moment, I was thinking, okay, I'll try to sell the audio rights to Ascendant to a studio and do it that way, because doing it on my own hadn't worked out. So it was very fortuitous that timing worked in. Another bit of luck, because during COVID, the studios were all shut, people weren't recording so much. So Peter Kenny had availability where maybe he wouldn't have otherwise. And it was cheaper just to pay him to do everything, because he did everything at home. He edited it and everything like that in his home studio. Right. So I definitely got a good price doing that during that time. And the subsequent books have been more expensive per hour because we've been back to the studio paying the whole teams there and everything. So right. Two ways I managed to get some of my stuff made a bit cheaper just due to circumstances and a bit of luck. And that they took off, that the box set took off when it did, probably maybe it would have always taken off if COVID hadn't been a thing, or I don't know. I'm not sure, but the advertising helped, and then it just sustained itself. And obviously, having 46 hours is a great bang for buck for your credit. And with a lot of people coming into Dragon's Blade, by the time Ascendant came out in audio, I'd built up an audio audience by then, so that obviously helped launch that one in audio. And then sort of the rest is history. That's a long-winded way to say to people, it was kind of a combination of half stumbling into it and half, like it wasn't a grand master plan. And at the very beginning, if someone had come along and said, hey, we want to take your book and record it and produce it and put it out, like, Podium, Atanto, or Dreamscape, or Audible itself, or any of those big companies, I'd have probably snapped it up straight away. If we're talking 2016 time, book one's out, if someone wanted to do that, then I would have snapped it up in an instant, because I wouldn't have known how valuable they could be. It's kind of by luck and chance and a little bit of hard work and risk taking that it paid off. So what I would say to boil it all, but the point is that if you can make it work with audio, it's very, very, very rewarding. It was transformative to not just have ebooks make money, but to have audiobooks make money too. because now you have two formats that are making money. People tend to stick to their preferred format. So if you only have ebooks, there's a huge section of the readership that listen who just won't ever get to your book because it's not in there. They can't listen to it. The people that serialize listen to things aren't going to read it suddenly. Like, that's not going to happen. And similarly, people who typically only read print books, they might find your book if you've got a PLD copy, but they're so much less likely because they probably just browse bookshops and this sort of thing. So like, you know, the market's very segmented nowadays. Certainly, if you're indie, you want to try and get an audiobook out there as quick as you can, if you can, because there's just a whole side of the market that you're missing out on. Sorry, I've almost forgot my train of thought. That's a long way to. The build-up is to say that they're worth. These rights are worth a lot, and the same way that you want control of your ebooks. If you're going to indie publish, if you are indie publishing for there's any number of reasons, but let's say that part of the reason you want to indie publish is to keep the control, have the full back, have the highest royalty on your ebook, that sort of thing. All of those reasons still apply for audio. It's just the barrier to entry is a little higher because the production costs are a little higher. But all of it applies, meaning the moment you sell your audio rights to a studio, you have become a hybrid offer. You're now working with a massive company, and all the pros and all the cons of working with a big publisher now apply. Okay, like if you're, because like these studios are putting out sometimes 1,000 titles a year or more. Like, they are massive. They are putting out so many titles that the chances that your title is going to get marketing support from them is next to none unless you're a big name. And as a debut, you're not a big name. And unless your book has just rocketed up the charts, and they know that because they look at the charts all the time. So if you're hot as hell coming out the gate, there's a chance that you'll get a big advance off of them and they'll really support it. That's possible. And if that offer comes in, certainly look at it. But if you're starting out, like most people, and you have to build it book by book, brick by brick, year by year, you're not going to get that attention straight away. Now, if you don't have the budget, definitely try to sell it if that's what you prefer, because it's better to have the audio out there and start gaining the listeners than not having one. And especially as you're doing any promotional work around your launches, you want to have the audio kind of there following up close behind you. It's much more important to have the audio in some form, even if you can't afford it straight away. So when starting out, if for some reason you have the budget, I would recommend thinking about recording it yourself, as in paying for the production, hiring a narrator or a narrator and the studio, and going through the whole process. It's a very easy process. It's not difficult. They do all the work, right? At the end of it, you just get the files that are completely ready to upload to Audible. Takes like an afternoon. Super easy. You just pay them. Okay? There's no hassle at all. If anyone tells you it's really difficult, they've either done it wrong or they're lying. Okay? It's really, really easy if you hire professionals. If you hire some random guy who's doing it for the first time, yeah, maybe something goes wrong. But right, don't do that. The number one reason to sell the rights is if you can't afford to do it yourself for whatever reason. Even if that's hey, that's too much of a gamble for me, man. That's fine. That's great. Just sell them on if you can. Do it. But if you find success in audio, know that they're worth a lot and don't just automatically sort of give it away again. Either angle for more money or consider recording yourself. It's so transformative to have both formats working for you. Like I said, I guess that's where I was going with the market fragmentation tangents, that like most indies rely almost solely on their ebooks. Imagine if you didn't have to rely, and then you worry about Kindle Unlimited and Amazon and all these things. Well, imagine if Kindle Unlimited is shrinking as a percentage of your income because your audio sales are so much bigger, your print sales are growing, that like you don't rely on any one thing in particular too heavily. That only comes by building the other formats up. The audio is a big market. There's a lot. There's rich rewards. It is, unfortunately, it's just an even higher risk, higher reward strategy. Like whether it's you doing it or a publisher doing it, the production costs are obviously a lot higher than producing an ebook. And so, and it's harder to get traction. You don't have any pricing power. There's almost no promotional opportunity that you can do. Sometimes Audible puts the books into sale, and it's one of those things of the better your book sells, the more Audible promotes you, kind of chicken and egg scenario. So it's a bigger risk, but the reward is proportionately bigger if you can make it work. So I try to recommend to people just to think about it deeply and don't sign off the rights to the first person that comes knocking necessarily. Like, think about it. If someone thinks it's worthwhile to buy it from you, maybe there's a reason, and maybe you should think about doing it. But again, if you don't have the budget, go on, sell. The companies aren't like charlatans. They do good work. They all do good work, but you are dealing with a big entity that has its issues of it being big. There's going to be slow replies. You're not going to be the special snowflake, unlikely that you're going to be in their top 10 considerations. And so you're still going to have to do all the hustle and all the selling and all the rest of it, and be okay with the fact that they're going to take their cut and all the rest of it. So it's, yeah. So Frank, what was the original question? What should people do when they start out? I think try to get it recorded. It's better to have an audiobook than not, because you need to access those listeners. If you don't have the budget, try to sell the rights. If no one's biting, keep working on selling the ebooks. Build up a sales record. Try to sell it again. If for some reason it doesn't work, but you have the money, think about recording it. But with the caveat is, it is a bigger risk. It is a much bigger risk, and there is a chance that you record it even with a good narrator, and you spend thousands of dollars and it doesn't work. And that's, yeah. I mean, putting out any book comes with that kind of risk. It's just even more pronounced with audio. But if fortune favors the bold, that's kind of the way to go. Like, I wouldn't be living the life I am without the audio. I wouldn't be where I am without the audio. As I say, I've stumbled into it, but because I have stumbled into it, I like to try to make people aware of, try to think about it a bit more carefully, because it's so often the default is to sell them, but you wouldn't default sell your ebook rights in the same way. You wouldn't default sell everything else in the same way. Yeah, if your barrier to entry is worrying about the difficulty of it, it's not difficult. The only barrier to entry is the cost. So it's just a question of that and how much risk you want to take.
Yep. Yeah. Boiled Jellyfish and I were talking about an author who I won't mention who the author is, but they've been a very successful self-published author. And I guess they recently decided they are not going to be producing an audiobook. And I'm personally bummed about it, because it sounds like a series I would like. But I know with the length of the books, it's like, if I pick that up physically to read it, I'll be reading it literally all year. And at that point, I'm not sure how much enjoyment I'm going to get out of a book that's spread that far apart. Whereas if it was an audiobook, I'd probably be through it in 3 or 4 days and then immediately picking up each book that came out. And I had heard Sullivan say something about, and it was something like 75% of his profits these days are from audio. And I was curious, is that just because he's already a big author, but you seem to be echoing that.
Well, yeah, so, everyone's a bit different. So, like, he's had huge success in audio, and so proportionate, I guess, that makes total sense. He's very big contracts with Audible. In terms of my overall income, I don't know, but 75% might be a bit high, but it's not crazy off. Maybe like two-thirds or 70%, yeah, something like that. It might be. It's pretty big.
Which the 75% might be off too. It was almost a year ago when I heard him mention that number, but it was a large number.
Yeah. So it depends on how much numbers you like to hear. if your ebook Ascendant is $4.99 as an ebook. If someone buys that, I get, I think, $3.40. Maybe yeah, about $3.40. I'm not sure if that's before or after the stupid download fee that they charge you. Call it $3.40. In audio, someone buys it with a credit, I'll get $5.60. So not quite double, but significantly more. And that's kind of because it's, although Audible screw us, was not lie, they take 60%, which is outrageous. Right? We only get 40% for taking on all the risk. Doesn't make any, it's unconscionable, and Brandon Sanderson has talked about this too. So it's out there. Yeah. Despite that, because we're getting 40% of, say, the credit value, which is like what, $15 or thereabouts, and there's some machinations with the longer your book, you get a slightly higher payout, but it's not that one-to-one. Just because they're more expensive products, even though we get a lower percentage rate compared to 70% in ebook, you get more money out typically. Now, the sequels in ebook are a little more priced higher, but there's a lot of Kindle Unlimited money there as well. Once the Unbound and Define, I typically get about $6.20 per sale out of them. So that's like, definitely kind of, you're looking at double what I'll get for an ebook of Ascendant and stuff like that. And so you're getting more, if you're self-published them like I have, and you have the rights and you're getting the full 40%, you're going to be getting, that's probably the most money you'll make, short of like some crazy special edition scenario or something like that. But you're typically, in your typical sale, audio will be your biggest bang for buck sale, which means even if you don't have to be selling as many as ebook to kind of make up a similar revenue. And then it's just, I think Sullivan's the same way, in a position where we actually get more sales in audio than in any other format. So it just piles on. It grows very, very quickly, right? That it just, and it kind of snowballs. I think with audio, it's much harder to get any traction at all because you haven't got price control. You can't do a 99 cents promotion like you can in ebook. It's a little harder to get rolling. But if you can get rolling, because there isn't that constant churn, first of all, there's less titles because less things are recorded. So there's less things in the store. There's less constant promotions and churn and crazy shit happening all the time. So the store's a little bit more stable. So if you can actually push the boulder up the hill, it has a bit more of its own momentum after a while. And whereas the ebooks kind of, spike at launch and then they'll dip and then they'll maybe find a new place, the audio kind of just keeps chugging along very, 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 very steadily. Almost statistically unlikely in terms of how steady it is, but that kind of, it's just a little bit stickier if you can crack it. So it's very, but we as Epic Fantasy authors benefit from their, how their system works. With everything being purchased as a credit, the longer the book is, the more that's perceived as being valuable, right? So other genres like thrillers or really short books, or short-tail books, like a normal fiction book, like a normal kind of literary or commercial fiction book might be 8 hours long because it's 80,000 words. Most audio people think that's too short, but it's more because of how the credit system works. So in Epic Fantasy, we benefit from this credit system, no doubt, right? If they changed that and they gave us pricing control, you would just have, there would be a race to the bottom. You would suddenly get a ton of 99 cents audiobooks. And then we who spend a lot more money to produce much bigger books would have to charge more. And suddenly the whole thing would shift around and it would change. But as it stands now, and hopefully kind of continues, and I say that because I benefit from it, right? Let's not pretend. The credit system benefits Epic Fantasy a lot, which is why, whereas like romance and other genres blow us out of the water on ebook and print and stuff like that, when you look on Audible, like so many of the top selling titles on Audible are big fat fantasy books, even if that's romantasy or whatever, they're just big. So they just have a lot, they get a lot more sales, this is the way the ecosystem works. Of course, you have to pay more money to record big books. So Right. Right. That's what I mean by risk reward. But
Yep.
I just would, people should consider it in more depth and know that they are worth a lot of money, and make that decision much more consciously, than just kind of default selling. It's kind of all I hope people do. Yep.
That was my thought, but I definitely hope more self-published books get audiobooks, because I've loved reading all the self-published books, because you don't have the gatekeeper on what gets published, so you get so much more variety. And yeah, that's usually my one limiting factor is I'll hear, oh, this book was really good. Does it have an audio?
But no audio.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Got you.
remind me again when there's an audiobook and I'll check it out.
Well, that's it. Like, you're the perfect example of the point that, like, it's important to get one if you can. There might be a position where you're not able to, but try your hardest to get some made in some way. The book you talked about, I know you're not going to name it, but if it is a very long book, that would obviously be a barrier, not just to them, but to a recording studio, because so once you hit 20 hours long, you start to get kind of the top end of the payouts. Even if you go to 40 hours, you don't get more money out per sale. So you're just doubling the cost without getting any. So in some ways, the absolute sweet spot is to hit like 20 hours on the dot and then,
Right.
peace, because you're going to hit the max kind of payout, without spending more money. So if it's an especially long book and they're a debut, I don't know if they are or not, that could be why a studio has been reluctant to take it on, because they're like, that's a risk, that might be why. But if they're selling well and they have a good track record and they keep at it, I'm sure someone would bite eventually. Just got to build that up.
I haven't checked, but I feel like they had about 1,000 ratings on Goodreads, which, again, for a debut self-published book, that is phenomenal. If you've gotten 1,000 people to go onto Goodreads and actually rate it.
Yeah, definitely.
Not everyone who reads the book is gonna rate the book.
No, and especially in self-pub. But I feel like with self-published books, this is a general observation. I don't know if it's strictly true. I think people that read ebook and listen to audiobooks, I think people that listen to audiobooks don't use Goodreads. I think they typically review an Audible if they're going to review, personally. If you are a digital reader, I think, and reading a lot of indie stuff, I think you're just less likely to review full stop. If you're someone that's really paperback, hardback orientated, a bit more trad focused, I think you review more often on Goodreads. I think you're maybe a bit more hooked into the system. That's why you see, because Mark Lawrence comes out with stats every so often at one point saying that he reckons 1 in 7 people review on Goodreads based off of his stats and things that he's seen from other authors. But if you were to look at most indie titles, it's closer to like 1 in 25 or something like that, or maybe a bit higher. They just don't get reviewed as often, full stop. So yeah, so it's like 1,000 ratings on Goodreads is even more impressive if it's indie, because they're just less likely to have people come over to Goodreads and review. So yeah. Well, hopefully they get it made.
Hopefully, I think what I heard was they did not like the percentage that was being offered by Audible that you mentioned, and
right. Well,
unfortunately,
tough shit. Yeah. I wish that I sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but like that's the only way you'll get a better percentage is if you self-direct on your own website and you decide, but, and I think,
or be named Brandon Sanderson.
I don't even know if he might get a different percentage from the rest of us.
Probably not at Audible.
Sure. No, I don't even think. I think even at Audible, he wouldn't probably necessarily get a different royalty percentage. He probably just gets ludicrous advances or something like that. But the way that companies, they don't want to change the royalties, and I understand because I've been on the other side of that table. You don't want to play around with your royalties too much because it opens up a can of worms. So the way that you overpay is just to pay an advance that's so eye-watering that it's like you're almost giving them a higher percentage royalty rate by just giving them so much upfront that's how they get around that. So I presume that's what happens with Fizz.
That's what. Sullivan talked about it. that
you're
traditionally published.
not
You
going to
get
get a better rate. Yeah, your 40% is as it is. I hope they change that. I don't know why they would, because they're a monopoly, but I mean, maybe the only way you're going to get a better rate is if you sell direct on your website. I do hope that's the future. I think selling direct will become more common. I think 10 years from now, I think that's kind of where we'll be. But I mean, I don't know. But getting people to actually do that is the tough part. I have thought about doing it, and I've polled around. I kind of did a poll test of my Discord not so long ago, kind of testing the waters there. Because I was wondering whether maybe I could do the Novelas for like a quid on the website or something, just to like get, because I wasn't sure what I would do with them. The response overwhelmingly was, if it ain't on Audible, I ain't getting it. People like the Audible app. It's smooth. If they use it on their phone, there's like a big one button buy. It goes into the library, downloads straight away, plays very well, syncs across different devices, and they want it all in one place, which I understand. And what I saw, like, there was people who said that they backed Brandon's Kickstarter, so they were backers, so they were entitled to these books, but because it wasn't on Audible, they hadn't listened to them. They just got the books and put them on the shelf, whatever. But they're like you, predominantly audiobook people who would prefer to listen to the book, but because it wasn't Audible, even though they had paid for it, they didn't get to it.
That's
right?
interesting.
And that made me just be like, okay, if Brandon's super fans who paid a lot of money aren't willing to listen to something non-audible, we're not quite there yet. It's kind of like, we're not quite there yet. The apparatus is in place, because if you downloaded my Novelas, relatively smooth, kind of functions the same way. It's just not Audible. It's a different app. So the infrastructure is there. It exists now. I do hope that more people experiment with it. I hope more people try it. I hope more people find success doing it that way. I hope over time people become okay with the idea that they'll buy directly from the author, and maybe their books will be a little more higgledy-piggledy and not all on one app, but that might be okay. That, like, you're giving the author the full support and the bigger cut and all the rest of it. But for now, I think it's still too early for that.
I didn't know I was that much of an outlier, because I use obviously Audible and then Libby.
Yeah.
Libby's actually probably for traditionally published, it's almost exclusively Libby, because I'm fortunate to have a fantastic library where I live. So I usually don't have any problem finding traditionally published books on Libby. I've used Chirp, Spotify, Author Direct when it was a thing. Libro FM. I tried using that, but I ran into an issue with that one, so haven't gone back to try it again yet. But
it's I mean, maybe more people. I do think it's safe to say most people who listen just use Audible exclusively. But yeah, I mean, you might be. I think you're definitely an outlier to use all those different platforms. But if we're talking about indie specific stuff, you're not going to fuss around with all those other platforms. It's already too hard. Like, if you go non-exclusive from Audible, you go from 40% to 20%. You're just not going to get the sales across those other sites. It's just Spotify can't even tell you how they pay you yet. They still don't seem to understand. They still don't have clear documentation on how we get paid and what. So it's like, maybe not.
And they're really the ones you need to get going, because they're the only ones that have really the size and already the market to compete with Audible. Even if they didn't have audiobooks, I still have the Spotify app on my phone. So if they improved, it would. All right, put my audiobooks and my music on the same app.
I fear the reality is that actually you make less on them. So it's one of those things of like, well, I'm not going to move for less. It's just if you want to take them on, you've got to really offer a reason to move. The traditional books are all over the place because obviously those companies don't want to be exclusive for good reasons. And they're going for the volume, but as a single author, it's and you're taking on all the costs and stuff like that. Trust me, it's just your life is made a lot easier by being exclusive. Unfortunately, again, I know people don't like to hear that, but it's true. Kindle Limited is a really good system to get you visibility when you're a nobody, and being on Audible exclusive is really good because if you are successful. I'm kind of tied. I've always got the golden handcuffs now because I do well with them. They help me out now. It's a bit more reciprocal, which is nice.
Right.
So like for me to leave and go to a different platform or to sell direct, it'd have to be a really massive sea change now because of I feel pretty locked in. Just grab the bull by the horns and then keep holding on until I get kicked off at this point.
Right. Yep. That makes sense.
Yeah. So there's my tirade on the audiobook market. There you go.
Right.
I love it, but has some problems.
Let's do another live show where we just talk about audio.
Pure audio show. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I'll be there for that round table.
All right. Well, it's been about 2.5 hours. Really appreciate your time. And
flown in.
Yeah. Thanks for everyone who stopped by and watched. If you want to know more about Songs of Chaos, Dragon's Blade, or anything Michael's working on, the description has the link to his website and the link to his Discord in there. And if you want those free novellas, just stop by his website and sign up for the newsletter. They're an ebook and audiobook.
That's great. Well, thanks for having me here, Patrick. It was great fun. Thanks for your time as well. 2.5 hours.
Yep.
It's a long day.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.